Welcome to Stump the Pastor. Today's question is from Janice from Birmingham. She's a member of my congregation, just so you know. She asks, if a man is made in God's image, how come we're not invisible? That's actually a quote from Father Garducci, just so you know. Well, thanks for the great question, Janice. I know that she asked this question playfully, so I thought we would start out a new year on Stump the Pastor with something that's just a bit more humorous, but also actually something very important. And this is the perfect question for it. Now, if you've been around church much, you've probably heard something about what it means to be made in God's image. And as Father Garducci and Janice remind us, it may not be as simple a question as we thought. You see, people have asked this question and answered it in lots of different ways over the centuries. In one of the creation stories, for example, when God created the humans, one of the main concerns was that humans be made in God's image. The story even talks about God walking like humans walk. Much of the religious thinking of early people thought of God like us, only different, all-powerful or more loving, or maybe better abs, I don't know. And interestingly, it should be noted that only Christianity and Judaism, among all the world's great religions, speak of humans being made in God's image. And there's not much evidence for this even in the Bible for what it means. It's only mentioned 6 times. That's including both Older and Newer Testaments combined. Theologians have struggled with the question of the imago Dei, the image of God, by trying on lots of ideas over the centuries. If you've ever seen God portrayed in paintings as an old bearded white guy sitting on a cloud, you've seen some of the ideas about the imago Dei. And some of those ideas have not been very helpful for lots of reasons. One of the primary reasons, though, is that it often assumes God is the race of the people in charge. That means that racism is easily projected upon the divine, which then is used to justify all sorts of awful things like slavery, war, atrocity, hatred. If God looks like us, then what we do is okay, right? This is actually what we call making God in our image. Well, I believe we reflect the image of God when we are both self-aware and able to comprehend how our actions affect others in our world. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks has written that what makes humans unique as a species is our ability to choose between I and us. He calls human ability to choose to live together as a people as the definition of morality. In other words, if we live together where the concern of the whole is our focus, rather than simply one's own well-being, then we are moral people. And I would add that then we are living the image of God. But when my decisions simply enrich me without concern for the world, Sacks would say this is an immoral life, or that we are not living in the image of God. You know, it is not just about action. It involves intent and empathy, ability to see the bigger picture, and so forth. Love, for example, is the choice to put the needs of others ahead of one's own needs. This kind of love is why God created the world, according to the creation stories. Why humans have self-determination. Why we can choose whether or not to be self-centered. Much of what our nation has gone through over the last 4 years is directly applicable to this idea of the image of God. You see, so much of the disdain that we see hurled at each other is based on an I worldview. Others receive services that I don't seem to get. Others are given status that seems to take something away from my status. Everything from tax policy to Social Security to wearing a mask has to do with how it affects me in these ways of thinking. You see, when we lose the perspective that we are all in this life together, that we actually need each other, we divide ourselves into insulated compounds of resentment, and we no longer reflect the image of God. So my hope for this new year is that we reclaim our place in the image of God. It means doing things like loving unconditionally, offering grace when our ideas clash, and looking for the face of God in the face of the stranger. For you see, that stranger, just like you and me, is made in the image of God. And no, it doesn't mean we'll become invisible. See you next time on Stump the Pastor. Well, there you go, Janice. I hope you enjoyed your Stump the Pastor this week. If the rest of you have questions you would like to send in, please, the address is on the bottom of your screen. Give them to me, and we'll feature them on a future Stump the Pastor. See you next time.